When you pray, when you desire, do you beg and plead as though speaking to some distant deity who may or may not grant your wishes? Or do you know with unwavering certainty that what you have imagined in the theater of your mind is already accomplished? This is the secret I wish to impart to you tonight, to live as though God has already answered. Consider for a moment what it means to live in the end. Many approach manifestation backwards. They believe that when their desire is fulfilled in the outer world, then they will feel the joy, the relief, the satisfaction of having received it. But I tell you, this feeling precedes manifestation. The world is nothing more than the outpicturing of states of consciousness. If you would claim a thing as yours, you must first assume the feeling of already possessing it. There's a passage in Scripture that illuminates this principle with crystal clarity. Therefore, I tell you, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. Not that you will receive it at some distant point in the future, but that you have received it now. The secret is to live from the end, not for it. Let me share a simple truth that many find difficult to accept. The world you perceive is nothing more than your own consciousness pushed out. There is no one to change but self. There is nothing to change but your concept of self. If you would change the outer world, you must first change your inner assumptions. Tonight, I wish to guide you to that place within yourself where creation has already been completed. For all that you could ever desire already exists in the realm of infinite possibility. Your task is not to create it anew, but to simply appropriate what already is. Imagine, if you will, that you have a desire. Perhaps it is financial abundance, vibrant health, a loving relationship, or success in your chosen field. The natural tendency of man is to look at present circumstances and say, but how? How can this desire possibly be realized given my current reality? And in that moment, imagination is subordinated to the evidence of the senses. This is the cardinal error. Your senses show you only the effects of past beliefs and assumptions. They cannot show you what is possible. They can only report what has already been manifested. To concern yourself with the how is to place limitations upon the limitless. Instead, I urge you to ask yourself, how would I feel if my desire were already fulfilled? Then, in the quiet of your own mind, capture that feeling. For feeling is the secret. Every night before you enter into sleep, assume the consciousness of already being what you want to be, of already having what you want to have. Sleep, that mystic state, is the time when the subconscious mind is most impressionable. As you slumber, the seed you have planted will be watered and nourished, growing into manifestation by laws divine and perfect. There was a man who came to me in dire financial straits. His business was failing, debts were mounting, and fear had taken hold of his mind. I told him what I'm telling you, to live as though God had already answered his prayer for abundance. Each night, this man would feel the joy and relief of financial freedom. He would count imaginary money, feel crisp bills between his fingers, write imaginary checks with ease and gratitude. He would fall asleep in this state of wealth consciousness. Within a month, an opportunity presented itself that he could never have conceived of through conscious reasoning. A merger was proposed that not only saved his business but expanded it beyond his highest expectations. The outer circumstances rearranged themselves to match his inner assumption of wealth. Was this mere coincidence? I tell you, there is no such thing as coincidence. There is only the working of law. As a man assumes, so does he become. Consider the story of another who desired health after years of chronic illness. Instead of focusing on symptoms and limitations, she began to live from the state of perfect health. In her imagination, she moved with vitality, breathed deeply without pain, and gave thanks for her strong, healthy body. She persisted in this assumption despite all evidence to the contrary. Medical tests eventually confirmed what she had already known in consciousness. Her condition had dramatically improved. The doctors called it spontaneous remission. But there was nothing spontaneous about it. It was the natural result of a shift in consciousness. For consciousness is the only reality. You see, the outer world must and will conform to your inner assumptions. It has no choice in the matter, for that is the law by which creation operates. Now, let us address a question that inevitably arises. What of efforts that seem to fail? What of desires that remain unfulfilled despite applying these principles? I say to you that there is no failure in the proper use of imagination. What appears as failure is simply the revelation of a conflict within consciousness. Perhaps you affirm one thing while deeply believing another. Perhaps you mentally argue against your own good. Or perhaps, and this is often the case, you have not truly assumed the feeling of the wish fulfilled with sufficient intensity and persistence. For imagination to be effective must be faithful. You cannot mentally vacillate between states of having and not having. You must be single-minded in your assumption. As James warned, he who wavers is like a wave of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Living as though God has already answered means maintaining your assumption despite all evidence to the contrary. It means being faithful to the unseen reality of your desire fulfilled, while the senses still report the old story. This faithfulness is not always easy. The world will test your resolve. Friends and family may mock your new attitude when circumstances have not yet changed. Your own doubts may arise like specters in the night. This is the wilderness period, the interval between your assumption and its manifestation in the outer world. During this period, you must guard your mind as one would guard a precious treasure. For your mind is indeed the treasury from which all your experiences are drawn. Mental diets are as necessary as physical ones. Feed your mind with the assumption of your wish fulfilled, and starve all contrary thoughts by withdrawing attention from them. Let me tell you something of the nature of assumption. An assumption is not a verbal statement, though it may begin as one. A true assumption is a state of consciousness, a mood, a feeling that permeates your entire being. When you genuinely assume a state, you think from it, not of it. There is a world of difference between the two. To think of being wealthy is to implicitly acknowledge that you are not wealthy now. But to think from wealth is to view the world through the eyes of a wealthy person. How would you react to a friend's request if you were wealthy? How would you plan your day? What thoughts would cross your mind as you make purchases or review your finances? This is thinking from the state, and it is this type of thinking that has the power to transform your world. For as you assume a state, you are transferred into it. Your assumption, though false to your senses, if persisted in, will harden into fact. There is a technique I have often shared that aids in making this transfer of consciousness. I call it revision. At the end of each day, before you enter into sleep, review the events that were not in harmony with your ideal. In your imagination, rewrite these scenes as you would have wished them to be. If you had a disagreement with a loved one, revise it to reflect understanding and harmony. If you received disappointing news, revise it to reflect the news you would have wanted to hear. This is not mere wishful thinking or denial of reality. This is the conscious exercise of your divine power to create reality. For remember, there is no reality outside of consciousness. What you take to be an objective, immutable world is really a malleable, plastic substance waiting to be shaped by your assumptions. The Bible tells us that God called forth that which did not exist as though it did, and so it came to be. This is the pattern we are to follow. Now, let me address a common misconception. Some believe that this teaching encourages passivity, that one need only imagine and then wait for desires to manifest without taking action. This is a misunderstanding of the principle. Action will always be necessary in this world of effects, but the action that stems from a changed consciousness is qualitatively different from the action that is taken in an attempt to change consciousness. When you assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled, you will be compelled from within to take whatever action is necessary for its manifestation. This action will feel natural, effortless, and inspired rather than forced or contrived. A student once asked me, "But Neville, shall I not make plans for the future?" I replied, "Make your plans in accordance with the state you have assumed. If you have assumed wealth, make the plans a wealthy person would make. If you have assumed health, make the plans a healthy person would make. Your actions must be in alignment with your assumption. This is walking by faith and not by sight. Faith is nothing more than consciousness of being that which you desire to be. Walking by faith means living from the state of consciousness of your wish fulfilled, while your senses may still tell you otherwise. I recall a letter from a woman who had attended one of my lectures. She had been separated from her husband for many years and desired reconciliation. though there had been no contact between them. After hearing these principles, she began to sleep each night in the assumption that her husband was beside her. She would feel his presence, speak to him in her imagination, and feel the joy of their reunion. Within 2 weeks, she received a telephone call from him. He was in town and wished to see her. Their meeting led to a complete reconciliation, and they never again separated. What brought this about? Not her actions in the outer world, for she had taken none. It was her shifting consciousness, her faithful assumption that brought about the change in circumstances. Now, some of you may be wondering about time frames. How long, you ask, will it take for my assumption to materialize in the outer world? This is a natural question, but one that betrays a misunderstanding of the process. Time is not a factor in the operation of this law. What is a factor is the intensity of your assumption and your faithfulness to it. Some desires manifest instantly, others take longer to unfold. The key is to continue living from the end, undeterred by the passage of time and the lack of physical evidence. Remember the story of Joseph in Scripture. He had a dream, a vision of his brothers bowing down to him. Years passed, and circumstances seemed to take him further and further from his vision's fulfillment. He was sold into slavery, falsely accused, imprisoned. Yet in God's perfect timing, every detail of his dream was realized. This teaches us an important lesson. The vision has its own appointed hour. It ripens its flowers. If it seems long, wait, for it is sure, and it will not be late. Your role is not to set the timetable, but to maintain the assumption that your desire is already fulfilled. Now I'd like to speak about something that many spiritual teachings neglect: the importance of your self-concept in the manifestation process. For you cannot long maintain an assumption that is at odds with your concept of self. If deep within you believe yourself unworthy of love, you may find it difficult to sustain the assumption of being in a loving relationship. If you secretly believe that wealth is corrupting, or that wealthy people are somehow immoral, you will sabotage your efforts to manifest abundance. Therefore, the greatest assumption of all is that of being God's beloved child, heir to all the riches of heaven and earth. As you read in Scripture, all things are yours. This is not a statement of future possibility, but of present fact. All that the Father has is already yours. When you truly accept this, you will find it easier to live from the state of your wish fulfilled, whatever that wish may be. For you will know that you are not seeking to get something you lack, but simply to claim what is already yours. This brings us to another crucial aspect of living as though God has already answered: gratitude. Genuine gratitude is not merely being thankful for what you have received in the past or hope to receive in the future. True gratitude springs from the knowledge that what you desire is already yours in consciousness. Gratitude then becomes the feeling tone of your assumption. You give thanks not to make something happen, but because it has already happened in the one reality that truly matters, the reality of consciousness. There was a woman who desired a specific amount of money to pay off debts that had accumulated over years. Rather than focusing on the debts and the lack of money, she began to live each day in a state of gratitude for having received this sum. She would count the exact amount in her imagination before sleep. She would feel the relief, the freedom, the joy of debt-free living. She maintained this attitude of gratitude for several weeks, telling no one of what she was doing. Then, through a series of events that no one could have predicted, involving an overlooked insurance policy and a small inheritance, she received almost to the penny the exact sum she had been imagining. Was this a miracle? By the world's standards, perhaps. But by the standards of the law we are discussing, it was simply the natural outcome of her faithfully assumed state. For that which is assumed, if persisted in, must objectify itself in the outer world. I want to address something that is often misunderstood in spiritual teachings: the nature of God. For if you are to live as though God has already answered, you must understand who this God is that answers prayer. God is not some being separate from yourself, waiting in the heavens to grant or deny your petitions based on some arbitrary standard of worthiness. God is your own wonderful human imagination. This is the creative power that shapes your world. This is the I am at the center of your being. When scripture says, I am that I am, it is revealing the nature of God and the nature of man, for they are one. Whatever you attach to the phrase one in your consciousness becomes your reality. I am poor. I am wealthy. I am loved. I am neglected. I am healthy. I am sick. These are all creative statements. Therefore, when you imagine your desires fulfilled and feel the reality of it, you are experiencing God answering your prayer in the only place prayer is ever answered, in consciousness. Living as though God has already answered means claiming your rightful place as a creative being made in God's image. It means recognizing that the power to shape your life lies not in some external force, but in your own consciousness. Let me share with you an experience that illustrates this principle in action. Years ago, a young man attended my lectures who had been seeking employment without success. He had the qualifications, he had the experience, but doors seemed to close before he could even present himself. After learning these principles, he began to sleep each night in the assumption that he was employed in the position he desired. He would feel himself sitting at the desk, interacting with colleagues, receiving his paycheck. Within 10 days, he was called for an interview at a company he had not even known. A mutual acquaintance had recommended him. The position offered was even better than the one he had been imagining, with greater responsibility and higher compensation. What brought this about? His change of consciousness. You see, the world is not responding to your wishes, your hopes, or your efforts. It is responding with mathematical precision to your state of consciousness. Change the cause, consciousness, and you change the effect, circumstances. Now let us delve deeper into the practical application of this principle. How exactly does one live as though God has already answered? It begins with a decision to mentally dwell in the state of the wish fulfilled, despite all appearances to the contrary. This decision must then be followed by mental and emotional discipline. Throughout your day, whenever your thoughts drift back to the problem or the lack, gently bring them back to the solution, to the state of fulfillment. This is the practice of mindfulness applied to creative imagination. There are specific times when this practice is most effective. The moments before sleep and upon first awakening are particularly potent, for it is during these twilight states that the conscious and subconscious minds are most permeable to one another. As you lay your head upon the pillow, mentally construct a scene that would imply your desire has been fulfilled. Make it as vivid and as real as possible. Involve all your senses. What would you see? What would you hear? What would you touch? How would you feel emotionally? Then allow yourself to fall asleep within this imaginative act. Similarly, in those drowsy moments upon awakening, before the concerns of the day flood in, revisit your imaginal scene. Feel again the joy, the gratitude, the fulfillment. This plants the seed deeply in the fertile soil of the subconscious mind. Throughout your waking hours, there will be moments when doubt arises. This is natural. The senses are persistent in their reports, and old habits of thought do not yield easily. When this occurs, do not fight or resist these thoughts. Instead, gently return to your assumption. Remember, energy flows where attention goes. Withdraw attention from the unwanted state and place it firmly in the state of your wish fulfilled. A technique that many find helpful during these moments is the simple question, how would I be feeling right now if my desire were already fulfilled? Then, without waiting for the logical mind to intervene, immediately adopt that feeling state. Feeling is the secret, the bridge between imagination and manifestation. Now, there may be those among you who are thinking, but this all seems like self-deception. Isn't it dishonest to pretend that I have something when clearly I don't? This question reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of the nature of reality. What you perceive as solid, immutable reality is actually the shadow cast by previous states of consciousness. Your physical environment, your circumstances, your relationships, all are projections of states you have occupied in consciousness. They have no independent reality apart from the meaning and power you give them. Therefore, when you assume a new state in consciousness, you are not lying to yourself or practicing self-deception. You are exercising your divine prerogative to choose the state from which you will view the world. This is not pretense, it is the highest form of truth, acknowledging the creative power of your consciousness. The world may call this madness. But remember what Scripture tells us. The wisdom of God is foolishness to men. Those who understand this principle and apply it consistently find that the world has no choice but to reshape itself around their assumptions. I am often asked about desire, its nature, and its role in this process. Some spiritual teachings suggest that desire itself is the root of suffering and should be transcended. Others teach that desire is God's way of guiding us toward our highest good. My understanding is this: desire in its purest form is God's voice within you, calling you toward the expansion and fuller expression of life. However, desire becomes problematic when it is rooted in a sense of lack or incompleteness, when you believe that you need this thing outside yourself to be whole or happy. The secret is to desire from a position of fullness, not emptiness. To want what you want because it would be a joyful expression of life, not because you believe it would complete you. This subtle distinction makes all the difference in how your desire is manifested. When you live as though God has already answered, you are desiring from fullness. You are claiming that in consciousness your desire is already fulfilled. You are complete, whole, lacking nothing. From this state, manifestation flows naturally and effortlessly. Let me address another question that frequently arises. What if my desire involves other people? Surely I cannot control another's free will. This concern stems from a misunderstanding of both the nature of consciousness and the nature of free will. Everyone in your world is an aspect of your consciousness pushed out. This does not mean they lack free will. It means that real them that appears in your reality conforms to your assumptions about them. If you assume that someone is uncooperative, that version of them will appear in your experience. If you assume they are helpful and kind, that is the version you will encounter. This is not manipulation, it is the law of consciousness in operation. Therefore, when your desire involves others, you need not worry about infringing upon their free will. Simply assume that they are already the way you desire them to be. In your imagination, hear them saying what you wish to hear. See them doing what you wish them to do. Feel the satisfaction of this harmonious relationship. Then release them completely. Do not specify how or when they must conform to this assumption. Give infinite intelligence the freedom to bring about your desire in ways that serve the highest good of all involved. I recall a woman who had a strained relationship with her daughter-in-law. Despite her best efforts to be friendly, there was always tension between them. After learning these principles, she began to imagine conversations with her daughter-in-law that were warm and loving. She would fall asleep feeling the joy of this harmonious relationship. Within weeks, without any direct action on her part, her daughter-in-law's attitude began to soften. Invitations were extended, pleasant phone calls were received, and a genuine friendship began to blossom. The woman had changed no one but herself. Her concept of her daughter-in-law and her outer world reshaped itself accordingly. This brings us to another important aspect of living as though God has already answered: detachment from outcomes. While this may seem contradictory to what I have been sharing, it is actually complementary. To live in the end means to assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. But attached to this must be a willingness to let the infinite wisdom of God determine the how and the when of its manifestation. Your role is to remain faithful to the state you have assumed. God's role, the role of your own marvelous creative consciousness, is to bring about the manifestation in its own perfect way and timing. This detachment is not indifference. Rather, it is supreme confidence in the perfect working of the law. It is the peaceful certainty that what has been assumed in consciousness must objectify itself in reality. It is the difference between white-knuckle determination and graceful allowing. Those who master this art of detached assumption find that their manifestations often exceed their specific mental pictures. They receive not just what they imagine, but something even more perfectly suited to their desires. For the infinite intelligence of God knows what you truly desire better than your conscious mind does. Now I want to address what might be called the shadow side of this practice. What happens when we unconsciously assume negative states? For the law works with equal precision whether our assumptions are positive or negative. Many live their entire lives assuming lack, limitation, illness, or conflict, and then wonder why these conditions persist despite their best efforts to change them. They do not realize that their assumptions, often hidden beneath the surface of conscious awareness, are creating the very conditions they seek to escape. This is why self-observation is so crucial. Begin to notice the assumptions that underlie your thoughts, words, and emotions. What are you accepting as true about yourself and your world? What states are you unknowingly occupying? When you identify a negative assumption, do not fight or resist it. Remember, what you resist persists. Instead, simply withdraw your attention from it and place it lovingly on the assumption you wish to embody. For consciousness cannot serve two masters. It will follow where attention leads. There is a phenomenon I have observed in the application of this principle that I call the crisis of faith. Often just before a desire manifests, circumstances seem to worsen. It is as though the old state of consciousness is making a final stand before surrendering to the new. During this crisis, many abandon their assumption and revert to the old state, not realizing how close they were to success. This is the time for renewed faithfulness to your assumption. This is when living as though God has already answered is most powerfully tested and most powerfully demonstrated. Those who remain steadfast during this crisis, who continue to live from the end despite contrary evidence, are those who most quickly and dramatically manifest their desires. They have passed the test of faith, proving they are ready to embody the state they have assumed. Let me share with you a concept that may help during these times of testing: the Sabbath. In the biblical tradition, the Sabbath represents rest, the cessation of labor. In the context of conscious creation, it signifies that point where you rest from your mental labors, knowing the work is complete in consciousness. To enter this Sabbath state is to feel such certainty about your assumption that you no longer feel the need to repeat the imaginative act. There is a deep knowing that what you have assumed is already done. This is the perfect state of detached assumption I spoke of earlier. As you practice living as though God has already answered, you will begin to experience synchronicities, meaningful coincidences that confirm you are on the right track. A book falls open to just the page you needed to read. A chance conversation provides the very information you were seeking. A seemingly random meeting leads to the perfect opportunity. These synchronicities are not accidents. They are the subtle workings of the law as the outer world begins to conform to your inner assumptions. They are confirmations that the bridge of incidents leading to your desire's fulfillment is being built. Welcome these signs with gratitude, but do not become dependent on them. Your faith must rest not on external evidence, but on the conviction that what is assumed in consciousness must manifest in reality. This is the true meaning of faith, the evidence of things not seen. As we draw toward the conclusion of our discussion, I want to emphasize one final point. This principle of living as though God has already answered is not merely a technique for manifesting specific desires. It is a way of life, a state of being that aligns you with your divine nature. When you truly understand that your consciousness is the one and only reality, that the world you experience is simply consciousness objectified, you will approach all of life differently. You will move through your days with a quiet confidence and inner peace that comes from knowing you are the author of your experience. You will no longer be a victim of circumstances, but a conscious creator of your reality. You will no longer plead with an external God, but will commune with the God within. Your own wonderful human imagination. You will no longer live in anxious anticipation of what might be, but will rest in the certainty of what already is in consciousness. This is the freedom that awaits those who master the art of living as though God has already answered. This is the promise of the principle we have explored tonight. In the days and weeks to come, I encourage you to test this principle for yourself. Start with something small if you wish, something that does not arouse intense doubt or resistance. Assume the feeling of having already received it. Live from that assumption. Watch as the outer world reshapes itself to match your inner state. As you prove the law in these small ways, your confidence will grow. You will be ready to apply it to progressively larger desires. Eventually, you will reach a point where no desire seems impossible, for you will have experienced firsthand the truth that all things are possible to God, the God of your own consciousness. Remember always that the secret of manifestation is not in doing, but in being. Not in future action, but in present assumption. not in working toward your desire, but in living from its fulfillment. This is the pearl of great price, the treasure hidden in the field of your own consciousness. To possess it, you must sell all your former beliefs about the nature of reality, all your attachment to appearances, all your identification with lack and limitation. But oh, what a magnificent exchange! For in return, you receive the kingdom of heaven, the realization that all you could ever desire already exists within you as potential, waiting only for your assumption to call it forth into expression. So tonight, as you lay your head upon your pillow, do so with this knowledge God has already answered. Your desire is already fulfilled in the only reality that matters, the reality of consciousness. From this state of fulfilled desire, fall asleep. Let this be your prayer, your affirmation, your unwavering assumption. And as the days unfold, watch in wonder as your outer world begins to mirror what you have inwardly assumed. For this is the law and the prophets. The secret of the ages now revealed to those with eyes to see and ears to hear. God has already answered. Live from that glorious assumption and watch as miracles unfold in your life.